Hello, welcome to Author Hour. I'm your host, Richard Lyntton, author of North Korea Deception, an international spy thriller set in London, Moscow, Vladivostok, and Pyongyang. Hyde Park Deception, book 2 in the Deception series, is available on pre-order and coming very soon. Today, Ken Kalfus is the author of 3, soon to be 4 novels, Equilateral, The Commissariat of Enlightenment, and A Disorder Peculiar to the Country, which was a National Book Award finalist, and he's the author of 3 collections of short stories. His books have been translated into more than 10 foreign languages. He has also written for Harper's, the New York Review of Books, and the New York Times. A film adaptation of his short story, PU-239, aired on HBO. Congratulations, Ken, that's amazing. And his most recent work is Coup de Foudre, a novella and stories. But most importantly, you heard it here first, we are thrilled to announce that Ken's new novel, 2 AM in Little America, will be published in May 2022. Put it in your diary. And last but not least, those of you in the area might also be interested to read Ken's book, Christopher Morley's Philadelphia, a collection of essays by the early 20th century writer Christopher Morley, who was actually from Haverford. Wow, Ken. Wow. We had to get that all in. Thanks. Because you are a man, a much accomplished man, writer. Thank you for being here. How are you?
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
Lovely to have you. So exciting. You were just in France, Paris. Was that work related?
I was on what's called an artist's residency.
Nice.
My wife calls it a boondoggle,
Okay.
but I was in the south and I was in Paris, and just as well I was allowed in before the lockdown ended because of the residency. Then the lockdown was lifted. My wife met me in Paris.
Beautiful.
And it was nice. Yeah,
I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous. When you go to a beautiful place like that, because one of my favorite things to do is I go to Paris or Venice, to my favorite cities, and I like to read or write in cafes. My wife will go shopping with her friend, and that's what I love to do. Do you like to work when you're in those?
I do some writing, yes.
You do?
I mean, well, depends on what the trip is. I mean, sometimes I'm just traveling. It depends on what the trip is. In this residency, I had a month in my own studio, and when I get to Paris, I had to wait for my wife, so I had my own apartment. I worked there briefly. I mean, I also had fun too. It was fun, but I usually like to do some writing at least. Yeah.
So I was completely torn as to where to start today because our mutual friend Lee Himes, recommended Coup de Foudre, and then you said Commissariat of Enlightenment because of the Russia thing. So so let's just start with the latest novel. It's Coup de Foudre, which is a novella, and then short stories. It is based on the Dominique Strauss-Kahn, I want to say her name right, Nafissatou Diallo, sexual assault case. And I'm like, whoa, where is this going? Because I didn't realize that until I got into the book. And how do you... And it starts off with a lot of humor, and the guy's charming, and then there's this terrible, thing that happens in the story. How do you get your head around, the Me Too movement, the possible fallout? You're going into that really graphic, tricky area. Tell us how you came about wanting to write a story based on that episode.
Right now, I will say that the story, and some of your viewers might not, we have such short memories now, but about 10 years ago, the head of the International Monetary Fund was accused of sexually assaulting a housekeeper in a hotel in New York, and a pretty shocking case. Yeah. For many reasons, sexual assault, of course, but and what exactly happened, just the mystery of that, made my narrative juices. You maybe want to create a story out of that, but it was also a lot of issues. There were a lot of issues there. One of them was this was right during the middle of the Greek crisis, that the International Monetary Fund was being asked to help bail out Greece. But Angela Merkel, the chancellor of Germany, didn't want to go on with the IMF plan. She basically turned him down. So, part of the story is that, she is, to this day, I think, the most politically powerful woman in the world. And he then attacks he attacks an immigrant housekeeper in New York, one of the least powerful women in New York. And I found that exchange of power very interesting, and the other. That was sort of what drew me to the story.
What kind of like, have you got any blowback from people saying, oh, this is you make light of this very serious incident? I mean, how was the reaction?
There was some initial resistance with editors and publishers, I think.
There was?
They
said this is tricky,
Well, whatever. There might be other things wrong with the story as well. When people don't like something, it might just be because you succeed in getting everything across. But there was some initial... But I think generally the reviews were good. The reviews were sympathetic to what I was trying to do. And
I think it's important to take these issues that we feel passionate about. I mean, my book 2 that I told you about is set in Bosnia, and no one ever heard of Bosnia. They don't want to find out about the history. But
I do. I spent a year in Yugoslavia during the war.
Great. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But no, I just and I tried many years ago to get an agent for that book, and they said, oh, no one's interested in Bosnia. But I felt so strongly that there was these three factions, these religious factions, and the melting of Yugoslavia. It was so important to me that I thought, I've got to set a story around this. But of course I've embellished, of course I've exaggerated. So I think you've executed it so well, because I'm like, where's he going? Oh my God, he's going there. You're the way you write is so incredible. It's political, it's sex, it's money, it's power. And I just think it's incredible how you've done it. So hats off. I mean, I don't want to say too much more about the story, because yes, it is based on fact, but it is also
fictional. I should
exactly.
make the I should make clear that although I was obviously inspired by the news, I'm not claiming to know anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That no one else did know. I'm just this is fiction. This is
absolutely,
fiction.
Yeah. I mean, I just happened to have seen that the Netflix documentary a few months ago.
I saw that too, actually.
It brought it all back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that is Coup de Foudre. Tell us about 2 a.m. in Little America, because that's your next one. I don't know how much you can tell us, but it's kind of an interesting title. At least maybe you can explain that if you can.
Okay, well, I'll do my best, and it's my new novel coming out in May, and it's set. And I should just say, I've just begun talking about it, so I'm not as practiced as I am with maybe other books.
Okay. Whatever you feel comfortable.
But I'll just say it's set in an impoverished American enclave in a foreign country.
Okay.
Sometime in the near future, when more political violence here that we've already had, and
there's more political violence.
Yeah, in other words, bad things happen here. Worse things happen here.
Wow.
And a lot of young Americans, and this is where Bosnia comes in. A lot of young Americans have fled the United States into a world that's because of the violence.
Okay. Wow.
And America is not, and the world is not. It's kind of over America at this point. The migrants aren't so much. The American migrants don't have the same kind of mobility that we have now. Not every country accepts them.
Yep.
Not every country welcomes them, or they can't work, or they have visa issues. There's this one enclave where this young American arrives, where there's American things, and he gets a job. And again, I was thinking a lot about Yugoslavia. I mentioned I spent a year there at the beginning of the war, and not only the bad things that happened in Yugoslavia during the war, but the Yugoslav Bosnian diaspora, and how a lot of people all over the world nowadays have fled war and finding themselves in countries that don't necessarily welcome them. And so
Did you live there because of your wife?
My wife's a journalist,
Right.
and we were there. We were there for the first year of the
So you're in
Civil War.
Belgrade?
In
Is that where
Belgrade,
you were?
yeah.
Amazing.
Great city.
Yeah,
but
beautiful city.
unfortunate war.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
When you so your book was obviously 2 a.m. in Little America. It's obviously written before January 6th insurrection of this year. I noticed I just bought a copy of Daniel Silver's book, his latest book, The Cellist, and that's my genre, thriller genre. That he's my favorite author. But he actually puts an acknowledgement in the front saying this is to the state capitol police, and Washington PD who stood up for our democracy. Do you feel as a writer that those events, like you want to write more about that? Do you feel you should say something about that? Because I mean, you're sort of a national literary figure in a way. How when you saw what was going on in January, and however much you care to comment, like what did you feel?
I was in a car listening to an NPR, and I was still trying to process. Afterwards, I felt pretty sick. Felt like many people, I think, sick about what happened.
Right.
I don't think I recognized on the day it was happening in the car the extent of the violence. I would say I often use the news and current. Sorry, I can hear my mic here. The news and current history in my stories,
Yep.
but I don't necessarily see them as political per se.
Right.
In this new novel, 2 a.m. in Little America, I say there's been violence in the United States, but the name of the former president is never mentioned.
Right.
The actual left-right issues are never mentioned.
Yep.
That's left. What I'm more interested in this new novel, and in all my books in general, is how current events change our way of thinking about ourselves and about the world. Mm-hmm. In my new novel, I'm very much interested in how political tribalism makes it hard to us to see the simple objective truth about things. Mm-hmm. That we are so locked into our politics and our tribal politics, and it's actually a mental situation, and that's what I write about. And I would say in all my books, or quite a few of my books, are about current events and the personal human imagination, and how it gets distorted or whatever.
I mean, it's important because, like you say, people get locked into their sort of political and media lanes. So I feel like, obviously, literature and what you're saying is so important, because if you can just add a little bit of oil and get people's wheels turning and say, oh, well, maybe this or maybe that. I mean, how else do we get out of this crazy situation we're in now?
We try to add, I think in literature, we try to add something beyond what's in the news. Maybe not even about the news. I mean, not every book has to be about national events.
Sure.
My books tend to play off things like that, but certainly there's no responsibility to do that.
Right.
But I do feel that I think about things in a different way, like that.
Let me do some quick fire questions,
Sure.
because I feel like I want people to get a sense of who you are. Like,
Okay.
how long have you been writing?
Since I was in junior high school, let's say, in my 20s, I really decided I wanted to be a writer, and I started very seriously.
Did you
writing.
study writing at college or university, anything like that?
No, I actually didn't finish college.
Okay. What did you study?
Well, I did study. I wasn't really long enough to declare a major, but I did study. I did have to take some journalism classes.
Okay.
And the key thing for me as a writer, my college life
Yeah.
as a writer, and I was in a few colleges, but I worked on the school newspaper.
Okay.
In New York University.
Okay.
And I always tell if young people want to be writers, the best thing you can do in college is work for the school newspaper.
Great piece of
That's
advice.
you learn how to write for people, you learn how to get edited, you learn how to get the damn story done in time.
Yep.
I mean, not quite in time, and that's how you do it. And I learned a lot there. And,
You said something before we started. You said it took me years to get an agent, I think you said, or publisher. I can't remember what you said. Did you say agent?
Publisher. When my first book published, I was saying that I'd written a lot of short stories that were published in literary magazines, which are great places, things you should read, things you should write for. My first collection wasn't published until I was in my mid-40s.
Wow. Wow. So that's a lot of years that you were trying to get an agent, or did you have the agent?
No, I actually got my agent after I got my book published. If I sold the book, actually, no.
Wow.
No, forget the agent. It's just, so I think for a literary writer, and again, I'm not sure the path is the same as today as it was for me to say in the 90s, let's say, but you really want to get stories, if you're writing short stories, get them published in literary magazines. And there are quite a few good ones out there. And you go to, Barnes & Noble, wherever else they sell them, and buy a few, find one that you like, maybe subscribe to one that you like. And, I would sell one or two a year into literary magazine, small readership. But at a certain point, when you have like 15 of them, you have a certain amount of credibility. And one of my stories was published in Harper's Magazine, and that made a publisher called me. Actually, it's funny. They called me. They were in Minneapolis. They were a little bit unsure about the time. I was in Moscow, and they called me middle of the night.
Oh my goodness!
The time difference being a little more than they thought. And they said, "Well, do you have any other stories?" I said, I think I do. I went back to bed. My wife asked me, "Well, who was that?" A publisher.
Oh, that's exciting. And that's so what year was that?
This is 1990s, mid-1990s. That first story, PU 239, became the title story for my second book. And
you're glossing over the HBO thing.
And
that's amazing.
And later became an HBO movie,
So how did that come about? I mean, they came to you or you went to them?
They came to me, yeah. I wouldn't know how to do anything like that. And I would say it worked out exactly that should work out, in the sense that the man who became the director, Scott Burns, read a review of the book in the New York Times Book Review, went to the bookstore, bought the book, read the story,
amazing,
and then I guess called my. I don't know how he called my. I don't know how he found my agent, but it's not easy. It's
so the short. How long was the story?
The story was pretty short,
like 30 pages or something.
Probably shorter than that, actually.
Okay,
I forget off.
But just so everyone knows, so it's now an HBO. Is it a movie or
it's
a movie?
It was an HBO movie, but that was a very. It aired, I think, in 2007.
But it's great. It's great. I watched a little bit of it. I think you can get it on Amazon as well. But it's there, so you can check it out if you're interested. But that's called P239.
PU239. Which is the chemical symbol for plutonium. Right. And it's a comedy about plutonium theft in Moscow during the 90s.
Did they invite you over for filming?
I actually went. Yeah, I actually did some traveling with them. I was there. They actually shot most of the film in Bucharest. And they did an amazing job. They did a really amazing job turning parts of Bucharest to look like Moscow in the 90s, including the Bucharest metro. I mean, they did. I think,
which is incredibly ornate. If anyone hasn't been there,
well, so was Moscow.
Right, that's what I mean.
But in a different way.
Right.
And they did a really good job with language signs and stuff like that. And before that, I went with them for about a week to Moscow to show them. They're Americans. They didn't know, so I showed them, what I could see and what I could show them. We actually went to a nuclear facility while we were there.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So, and were you on set during?
I was on set for 2 weeks during and watching a movie getting made is pretty interesting and extraordinary.
Exciting, right?
I mean, you realize when you're watching things get made. There's a lot of artists at work, a lot of people bringing a lot of their imagination, a lot of their talent, and you're just. And I will say, the script is based on my story, but unlike a novel, we got to cut things to make it fit into a movie. With a short story, you got to expand things. So it's very different. I mean, director Scott Burns used a lot of his own imagination to make the movie.
And it's true. Like every single job, whether it's the actor, the art department, the wardrobe, the editor is also a big.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons. And even writing a book, to be honest, like I didn't realize before I started. You got your editor, you got your proofreader, you got your interior book design, you got your cover designer, you've got it's so many parts. And often as an actor, I say to myself, if I'm on set, I just say. now I've got these words, and there are literally 1,000 ways to say these words, and that's my job. And it's the same. Must have been the same when you, or tell me what it was like when you're there on the film set. Did they ask you? Did they ever say, well, is that what you meant? What kind of
They
input did
occasionally
you
ask me
have?
questions. They very often ignored what I had to say. There was this in the script. There was one gangster says to the other gangster, and I want the money in rubles. And I said, guys, in the 1,000-year-old history of Russian civilization, no one has ever said, I want the money in rubles.
Right.
There's stuff like that.
Did they listen?
Sometimes they did. A lot of things they didn't. There's one scene where some guys jumped a metro turnstile.
Yep.
Did you ever see that in Moscow?
People jumping it?
Yeah.
No.
No, you wouldn't. There's cops. There's militia there. Yeah, you wouldn't do that. And they're too high. But it's
milch, as they would say in Russian, right?
But who cares?
It's full change.
Yeah. But who cares?
But I do want to get onto this because Simon is right. So this is your first novel, correct?
Yes, my first novel. Yes.
Okay, The Commissariat of Enlightenment. Is this the poster that was taken from based on a Soviet poster? I was just curious.
I forget.
There's a couple.
I forget. I forget. I love that cover.
But anyway.
But yeah. I forget where it came from.
They compare you to Graham Greene, Salman Rushdie, and then
I'll take it.
Exactly. And then when I was reading it, I was thinking, I was honestly thinking Bulgakov, Master Margarita, Dostoevsky. So the point is, what I want to ask you is, your talent is obviously recognized. Do you which Russian writers influenced you? Did you ever want to write Dostoevsky or Gogol? Because it really, when you read this is set in 1910 in pre-revolutionary Russia, and a little train station. It starts off. It has it's Stalin comes along and Tolstoy is dying, and it's all about cinematographers. It's a fascinating sort of story. But tell me about that idea of people comparing you to great Russian writers or Salman Rushdie.
Obviously, it's gratifying. I don't know if I agree with all those things.
But did you read a lot of Russian?
Oh yeah. And I would say the Russian writers who I do gravitate towards are Gogol.
Okay.
He's a fabulist. He's surreal.
Yeah.
He's funny.
Yeah.
So all those things, including in the novellas. The Overcoat and The Nose, those are just great books. And Dead Souls, So yes, I very much identify with Gogol. One of the characters in this novel is Tolstoy.
Yep.
And there's always a push and pull supposedly between people who love Tolstoy and people who love Dostoevsky.
Right.
And there are really interesting. I don't think I have time to talk about all that. But they're really interesting distinctions.
Okay.
I think as a craftsman, Tolstoy is unequaled. Mm-hmm. And I think that even his Christian parables that he wrote in his life are perfectly constructed short stories. So yeah, I those are writers. I very much like the early 20th century writers after the war, after the revolution. People like Yevgeny Zamyatin and Yuri Olesha, who one of his books, Envy. I wrote the introduction of the book for the New York Review of Books. It's out there.
Did you read it did you read the books in Russian?
I look at them in Russian, and when I review a book in Russian, I review a book in English that's been translated. I will often look at the original just to get the voice.
Yeah.
My Russian isn't quite good enough to read a whole book. I read short stories.
But you do speak Russian.
I do, yeah.
And French.
A
little bit of French?
I would say my Russian, my French are okayish. I don't have a real facility with these foreign languages.
But where did you learn your Russian? Just by being there?
No, I actually studied Russian. My public high school in Long Island, New York, offered it in junior high school.
Okay.
And I took it in high school.
Yep.
I took it for the little time I was in college. I continued reading it and speaking it for all the years afterwards. I lived in Russia for 4 years. I had a tutor, and I still stink. Don't ask me about date of case, please.
No
but yeah.
way.
I love the language. I love hearing the language. I love if I'm in a street in Russia, I hear people talk. If in Philadelphia, I hear people talking about it. I get very excited. And I actually love the French language as well.
Me too.
But
yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Those two, we definitely have that in common, because I remember sort of aged 18 looking at university prospectuses, and there was this one Exeter University, and you could study Russian from scratch, and I was already studying French and German, so I looked at the Cyrillic, and I just thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to learn that language and go to the go to Moscow and go to those domes? I mean, that was my. Where was your first love of Russian? 'Cause you said you studied at high school.
Junior high school.
So
I was 13 years
why?
old. Well, when I was like 13 years old, I was like many other 13-year-old boys of that era. When I wanted to be an astronaut.
Okay.
And I felt, well, I had 4 languages to choose from. I felt, well, the Russians and the Americans will someday get together.
Yeah. That's so cool.
And I guess I was envisioning peaceful coexistence or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just felt, because I do have a very strong interest in science and astronomy, and I felt Russian would be the best language,
Wow.
I guess, to follow those interests.
How long did it take you to write The Commissariat of Enlightenment? Do you remember?
Well, it's funny. The first ideas for that book, I had made those ideas like in the mid 1980s. I wrote notes. It wasn't until about 20 years later that I actually sat down and wrote the book. And I'm guessing by 3 years.
3 years. Did that include the editing process? Was that start to finish, or was that just the first draft? You don't remember?
No, well, when you say first, no. When I consider it finished, is when I sent it off to publish it.
Right.
I would say 3. I tell you, it was 3 years from the time I went back to it, and because I remember I shopped it. I was going to shop it the week of 9/11, so I could tell you it was 3 years. Right. And then there's a publication process. But when I finish a book, it's not the first draft. It's been it's 100th draft before I even send it out. And then there's still things wrong with it.
Right. But I agree. Well, that's good to hear for someone like me who's sort of just starting, because it's great to hear you say that, because I still can't get over how many times I'm going through this again and again and again, and then the editor again and again. And I've only just, I confess, started really, like, I read my first book out loud to myself once, but now I'm reading the second one out much more. Yeah. Do you read out loud when you've finished?
Then when I finish, when I'm reading a paragraph, a sentence, well, mumble to myself a bit more. Like, I've done it so long now that I don't. But the placement of the words on the page, in the sentence, are pretty key. Are very key to me. Yep. And I will go over them over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many times. I mean. Right.
But will you say them out loud to yourself or not?
I will mumble them to myself sometimes. Yeah.
It's just such a tiny little thing for anyone who's writing. Like, just like Ken says, even as you mumble, I just found that a huge thing where I used to just read, and now I mumble out loud-ish, and it's just that tiny little tweak makes a big difference.
The sound of the word in the reader's brain is really important to a writer.
Right. I wanted to ask you about the cinematography. How much time do we have left, guys? But we can't, so we're out of time. So Ken, come back and tell us more about 2 a.m. in Little America.
I will. This has been terrific.
Thank you so much, Ken Kalfus, for a wonderful conversation today and for finding the time to come and join us. You can find out more about Ken's work at www.kenkalfus.com. Don't forget, mark your diary from May 2022 when Ken's book, 2 a.m. in Little America, will be published. I'm your host, Richard Lyntton, author of North Korea Deception, Book 1 in the Deception series, available in all formats, including audiobook on Amazon.com and around the world. Hyde Park Deception, Book 2 is coming soon. Cheerio. See you next time.